Strap into your seats and get ready. It's time for the Mortarpod.
Hey everybody, Alex Stephenson from SeemsGoodMagic.com here. Welcome to this week's episode of the Mortarpod, your weekly video podcast for custom Magic the Gathering sets based on movies, based on your suggestions, TV shows, books, movies, all sorts of different mediums of fiction that I turn into custom Magic sets. And this week's a good one. I like it a lot. A movie from my childhood that I watched, and I haven't seen it in a few years now, so I did have to do some reading to make sure I got all my information correctly. But this week we're doing Back to the Future. So Back to the Future, starring Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd. Great movie, Spielberg directed. Just really wonderful, cool idea, very entertaining, iconic for the 80s. Probably considered one of the best movies of all time in this day and age. I know Spielberg has a lot of those, so let's get into it. We've got Marty McFly, played by Michael J. Fox, and he has the mechanic of the set. So Marty McFly is two colorless, a red and a white, for a 3/4 Vigilance Haste mythic human creature, and he has the mechanic called Alter. So in the movie, Michael J. Fox ends up going back in time thanks to Christopher Lloyd's invention of the flux capacitor. And interacting with people in the past causes him to change events in the future. So I wanted the mechanic of this set to sort of evoke that. So it's called Alter, and it's whenever this creature blocks or becomes blocked, you may put a card from your hand on top of your library. If you do, take a card from the bottom of your library and put it into your hand. So I noticed there's not a lot of mechanics that deal with the bottom of your library, and there are quite a few mechanics that put cards on the bottom of your library. A lot of blue cards, like anything with a scry effect, can potentially put stuff on the bottom of your library. But sometimes stuff gets rid of your cards by putting it on the bottom of your library. So I wanted something that sort of alters reality, alters the reality of the game. So it's putting a card from your hand on top of your library, meaning you basically have to redraw that card. So it's like replaying that event again, but taking the card from the bottom of your library and putting it into your hand, potentially changing the events of the game dramatically. So that's Alter. Next we have Jennifer Parker, Marty McFly's girlfriend in the movie. She actually has a pretty small role. She only has a few lines. She has a bigger role in the second Back to the Future when the actress is changed to Elizabeth Shue. But in the first movie, you see her briefly in the beginning and then at the end after Marty's, altered reality. So Jennifer Parker is 2 white for a 1/2 rare legendary human, and when she enters the battlefield, another target white creature you control gets +2/+2 and gains lifelink for as long as you control Jennifer Parker. So I wanted her to be interact well with Marty. So if you have her on the battlefield with Marty, she boosts Marty, making him a 5/6 Vigilance Haste lifelinker. Pretty good ability mashup. So I think Jennifer Parker would see a lot of play for White Weenie decks. I would have played her in White Weenie when I was playing that years and years ago. I would have made her a more complex character, but there's really just not much to her personality in the story. Next we have Strickland's Discipline. So Gerald Strickland is kind of... I was going to make him an actual creature, but he also has a small role. He is in all of the Back to the Future movies, which is interesting, or at least a version of his character, a relative, an ancestor of his character at the very least. So Gerald Strickland is sort of the, hall monitor, or maybe the principal, I'm not sure, at Marty McFly's school, but he's worked there so long that even back in the 50s, when Marty goes back in time to and visits his dad and his mom. Strickland's still working there, which is really funny, and he looks the exact same. The running joke that did that guy ever have hair, I believe, is a Marty McFly line. So Strickland's discipline is 1 black. It's an aura. Enchant creature. When Strickland's discipline enters the battlefield, enchanted creature's controller loses 1 life, and then you can pay 3 and a blue and return enchanted creature and all auras attached to that creature to their owner's hand. So it's kind of a mashup rather, of Vapor Snag and Mark of Eviction, which is an old card that for 1 blue you could put it on a creature, and then during your upkeep it bounces that creature and all auras attached to it. So yeah, similar. Certainly similar functions. So I made this an uncommon, and I think that would definitely, it would definitely see some limited play, for sure. I think it would be a good card in limited. Next we have Dr. Emmett Brown, played by Christopher Lloyd. Very important character in the story, the inventor of both the flux capacitor and his modified DeLorean vehicle. So Dr. Emmett Brown is 2 colorless and 2 blue. He's a mythic human artificer legend. He's a 1/3. And then his abilities are your artifact spells cost 1 less to cast. And then you can tap him and add 3 mana of any combination of colors to your mana pool. But you can spend this mana only to cast artifact spells or activate abilities of artifacts. He also says Great Scott quite a few times throughout the movie, so I made that his flavor text. But yeah, since he's a inventor, obviously he had to be good with artifact spells. So I feel like making your artifacts cheaper and being able to ramp them is pretty insane. He can help you cast some pretty expensive artifact spells relatively quickly. Okay, next we have the modified DeLorean, and this was the most difficult card to make because of the wording on it. I had to look at Karn Liberated pretty closely because this card does involve a restart the game function ability. So Modified DeLorean is 4 colorless and 2 blue for a 4/4 mythic artifact creature construct. Whenever Modified DeLorean is dealt 6 or more damage from a non-creature source while it's attacking, exile Modified DeLorean and all cards attached to it. If a card named Flux Capacitor is exiled this way, restart the game, leaving those cards in exile, then put the exiled cards onto the battlefield under your control. So how that works, if it's confusing, I can understand if it is. Unfortunately, the text has to get pretty technical when it comes to restarting the game and then restarting the game with actual cards on the battlefield. So you'll see later what that dealt 6 or more damage from a non-creature source is referring to. But basically, while it's attacking, if you or your opponent were to deal 6 damage to it via an instant red spell, you exile it and all equipment, presumably, but auras would work as well, attached to it. So Flux Capacitor, the next card, if that's exiled, you get to restart the game, but you restart the game with the Modified DeLorean and everything attached to it still in exile. So after you've drawn your 7 cards and all of that nonsense, you get to put the DeLorean and all cards attached to it on the battlefield. And they even aren't affected by summoning sickness because they begin the game on the battlefield under your control. So if you manage to properly set up how this card is supposed to be played, you restart the game, so you each have 7 cards in your hand, no lands, but you have a Modified DeLorean and at least a Flux Capacitor attached to it. So definitely turn 1 4/4 with an equipment attached to it. That's going to be tough to beat, which is why the setup to make it work is kind of difficult. So next is the Flux Capacitor itself, which is a 2-mana legendary equipment card. It's a mythic. It can only be attached to artifact creatures. I didn't think it would make any sense if you could equip it to, human creatures, since it's a mechanical or electrical part that needs to be installed into, another piece of equipment. So equipped creature gains alter, so it gives that alter ability that Marty has, and then it equips for 1. So the setup on Modified DeLorean, once again, you have to have a Flux Capacitor equipped to it. You have to be attacking with your Modified DeLorean, and then on top of that, you have to deal 6 damage to it at instant speed while it's attacking. And remember, non-creature source, so your opponent can't block it and deal 6 damage and make it go off. It has to be either an instant or maybe a creature's activated ability that can deal 6 or more damage. Okay, so you've got that now. Next we have the Libyan terrorists. So after Christopher Lloyd or Dr. Brown shows Marty his modified DeLorean and the flux capacitor, these Libyan terrorists in a VW bug van come guns blazing, and they're after Dr. Emmett Brown. And it turns out the modified DeLorean runs on plutonium, which he stole from these Libyans. He made a deal with them that he would make them a bomb, but instead he just wants to use the plutonium that they supplied him with to power his modified DeLorean. So the Libyans are very upset about this. So for 4 and 2 red, you get a 3/3 human creature. It's an uncommon, and when it enters the battlefield, it deals 3 damage to target creature and opponent controls. So I don't know if you noticed, but Dr. Emmett Brown's toughness is 3, so the Libyan terrorists can kill him, which you believe they do in the movie. He gets gunned down by an assault rifle at close range. You find out at the end that he's wearing a bulletproof vest based on some information that Marty gave him in the past. So you have some very weird time twist sort of stuff. But I think even at close range with a bulletproof vest, I believe an assault rifle would still kill you at close range. That would take you out really bad. I don't care if you're wearing a bulletproof vest. I think a lot of people don't realize when you get shot with a bulletproof vest, a lot of those people still end up with broken ribs and in some cases still die. So bulletproof vests aren't some like magical vest that just stops bullets in their tracks without any pain to you. But it is a movie, so I'm not going to pull the... I mean, we're talking about a movie that has time travel in it, so who am I to nitpick something like a bulletproof vest working close range with a, assault rifle? So Marty ends up jumping in the car when he sees the Libyan terrorists gun down Dr. Brown and uses the plutonium to travel back in time. But the problem is he forgot to bring the rest of the plutonium in the vehicle. So he goes back to 1955 where it would be virtually impossible for a normal everyday person to acquire plutonium. So he also goes back in time and visits his father, George McFly, who's the next card. So George McFly is a colorless, a white, and a blue for a 1/2 rare legendary human creature. And then he has an activated ability of white and tap. Destroy target creature that was blocked by another creature you control this turn. So this is referring to the scene at the dance at the end of the movie when Marty's mom, Lorraine, is being almost like sexually assaulted by Biff Tannen. And George McFly finally steps up and knocks out Biff. So I wanted it to be Lorraine is blocking Biff, and then George saves Lorraine by destroying him, punching him out. Next we have Biff Tannen himself. So he was a bully, so I wanted him to have some bully mechanics, essentially. So Biff Tannen is 4 colorless, a black and a red for a 5/5 mythic legendary human creature. When he enters the battlefield, target opponent reveals 3 cards from his or her hand, and you choose one of them. That player discards that card. So it's got a blackmail effect on him. And then 2 and a red, tap, Biff Tannen fights target creature. So I find he's always getting in fights with people, bullying them. He's not blackmailing, but he is basically beating George from the 50s into doing his homework for him, and then beating George in the 80s into doing his work for him. So not much has changed in 30 years. Next we have Lorraine Baines, who eventually becomes Lorraine McFly, Marty's mom, but her maiden name is Baines. So she's 1 colorless, a red, and a white for a 2/2 legendary human creature. And then her abilities are black creatures and red creatures your opponents control must attack you each turn if able. Whenever a black or red creature attacks you, Lorraine Baines deals 1 damage to it. So Biff is constantly trying to, get on Lorraine, and she slaps him, so that's where the dealing 1 damage to him. So that's what I came to with Lorraine. I didn't know exactly what direction to go with her other than that. Next we have manure dump. So early on, Marty gets on Biff's bad side, but basically with a skateboard tricks Biff and his cronies into driving into the back of a manure truck, which dumps manure all over them and their vehicle. So I definitely wanted manure dump to show that. And manure dump is one colorless, a red and a green. It's a sorcery, uncommon. Manure dump deals 3 damage to target creature. Its controller sacrifices an artifact. So damages Biff but doesn't kill him and makes him sacrifice his car because his car is full of manure. Next we have Inspirational Head Bump. I think I might be most proud of this card from the set because I could actually see this being a card or something close to it. But Inspirational Head Bump is a tutor effect, which I do try to be careful with because tutor effects tend to be more often broken than not good enough. So I wanted to make sure this one had some, relatively tough stipulations to make happen. So Inspirational Head Bump is one colorless, a blue, and a red. It's a sorcery. It's also a rare. As an additional cost to cast Inspirational Head Bump, tap an untapped blue creature you control. Inspirational Head Bump deals 1 damage to it. And then the ability is search your library for an artifact card and exile it. Then shuffle your library. You may cast that card from exile this turn. So the card itself is based on Dr. Brown telling the story of how he came up with the flux capacitor. He hit his head back in the 50s in the bathroom, and that's where he came up with the idea for the flux capacitor, which could bend space and time. So a lot of stipulations for this one. You have to be multicolor, blue-red. You have to tap an untapped blue creature you control. The card deals 1 damage to it. Because bumping your head deals damage, of course. And then it lets you search for an artifact card and exile it, so you don't even put it in your hand, which means you can cast that card from exile this turn. So it basically lets you search for any artifact, but you have to pay that hefty 3 mana cost right up front, tap a blue creature you control, deal damage to it, and then if you want to be able to cast that artifact card, you have to cast it that same turn. So I felt like that was enough stuff that you have to do, enough setup where it would not be a broken tutor effect. And I think it turned out really well. I was happy with that one. Okay, next we have Traumatic Exchange. So this is another kind of funny scene from the movie. But Marty, Lorraine, his mom, actually ends up falling in love with, or not falling in love, but having a crush on her son, Marty, because she doesn't know that it's her son. So while Marty is desperately trying to hook his dad up with his mom is pursuing him, which definitely makes for some awkward screen time. But eventually Marty goes to the dance with Lorraine under the pretense that he's going to set her up with George at the dance. So Traumatic Exchange is when Marty and his mom are in the car together, and she ends up kissing him right on the mouth, and Marty just makes this face of pure terror as his mom is trying to make out with him. So Traumatic Exchange is 1 red. It's a sorcery. It's an uncommon. Choose 2 target creatures that share a color and a creature type. Those creatures can't block this turn. Traumatic Exchange deals 2 damage to one of those creatures. So share a color and a creature type. They're related, and they can't block because they're busy kissing. And then Traumatic Exchange deals 2 damage to one of them, the one that's traumatized, which in this case is Marty. Pretty happy with that one, how that one turned out too. Next we have Enchantment Under the Sea. And someone already criticized me for not making this an enchantment, which I felt like it would have been too, I don't know, maybe I should have, but this was more of one of my afterthought cards because I wanted to include it in the set, but I was having a hard time coming up with what exactly I wanted to do with it. I wanted to make it a fog effect, since it's kind of all the kids from the school gathering at the dance. So Enchantment Under the Sea is 2 colorless, a green and a white. It's an instant, and it's uncommon. You untap all attacking creatures, and then you gain 2 life for each creature on the battlefield, and then you prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. So it's a mashup of many different cards. It's kind of like Blunt the Assault in that it fogs and gains you life, but it's more like, it's also like the white, there's a white 4-drop card that lets you, I think it's called Sanctify maybe? Maybe not. But you gain 2 life for each creature on the battlefield. Because I thought it would probably be too good if your opponent attacked you with all of his creatures, and then you gain 2 life for each of them, and then you prevent all combat damage that would be dealt. I felt like that might be too good, so you can't really screw over your opponent's attack in that it untaps all attacking creatures. But you can still use this card kind of tactically when you're attacking. Maybe they have some sort of combat trick they want to use, so this could protect your creatures and allow you to still use them on defense. So still a versatile card and different enough where I thought it worked fairly well. But yes, somebody did criticize that it's called Enchantment Under the Sea, and it's not an enchantment. But I'm just calling it Enchantment Under the Sea because that was the name of the dance back in the 50s. Where Marty is still trying to desperately get his parents to hook up again. Next is a Erase Existence. This is a removal spell. It's 1 colorless, a blue, and a black. It's a sorcery. It's uncommon. And put target creature on the bottom of its owner's library. So there's not a lot of cards that do this, actually. Hinder does it when you counter a spell. But there's not a lot of just actual removal spells. Hallowed Burial is a card that puts all creatures on the bottom of their libraries. Condemn is a card that puts it on the bottom of their library. So it does seem like white often does it. But I don't see why blue couldn't do it since they did it with Hinder. The reason I didn't make it mono blue is it's definitely too good, in my opinion, to allow blue to have hard removal. So I included black in the casting cost since black is, known for its removal. So this just puts a creature on the bottom of its owner's library. Note that with the mechanic Alter, you can still get those creatures back from the bottom of your library. So I was conscious of that when I designed this card. But yes, throughout the movie, and you can see in the art, it's the scene where Marty is playing on stage during the dance, and George gets pushed out of the way by one of Biff's cronies who's dancing with Lorraine, and Marty starts to disappear until George, of course, steps in and pushes the bully out of the way and kisses Lorraine. And the kiss then brings him and his siblings back to reality, so they don't get erased, leading towards the happy ending. But they're not there yet. So since there's no plutonium back in the 50s that Marty can easily get, Dr. Brown rigs up a clock tower that, thanks to Marty's future information, they know that the clock tower is going to be struck by lightning at exactly a certain time, because the clock actually stops right when it's struck by lightning. So the rigged clock tower is 4 and a blue. It's a 0/6 artifact creature wall. It's a rare, and it has Defender. While choosing targets as part of casting a red spell, your opponents must choose rigged clock tower as a target if able, and then you can pay 2 blue and change a target of target spell that's targeting rigged clock tower. So kind of a mashup of both Spellskite and Coalition Honor Guards, which were the flag bearer type creatures from the past, and those had the same sort of thing. While your opponents are choosing targets, they have to choose a flag bearer. So rigged clock tower is similar, but it only works for red spells. So this would be a good red deck wins hose spell, which is why I made it rare and 5 mana. But yes, so you can change a target, and then finally that leads us to the last card in the set, which is the 1.21 gigawatt Bolt of Lightning. So this is the Bolt of Lightning that was capable of powering the DeLorean and the flux capacitor specifically to sending Marty back to his correct time. So the 1.21 gigawatt Bolt of Lightning is 2 colorless and 3 red. It's an instant. It's a rare. and it deals 6 damage to target creature or player. And then the flavor text is, you never know when it or where it's going to strike. That's actually a Doc Brown from the 50s quote. He said, the only thing that could generate that kind of power is a bolt of lightning, but unfortunately you never know when or where it's going to strike. But aha, Marty actually does know when or where it's going to strike. So that's why you have that elaborate setup on the modified DeLorean. But I made the 1.21 gigawatt bolt of lightning so that you could successfully attack with the DeLorean, bolt of lightning it with the flux capacitor, and restart the game with those in play. So I hope you enjoyed it. This set was a lot of fun to make. It did not go over so well on Reddit, but these things happen. It's okay. I still enjoyed making it. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to it. There's going to be some updates to SeemsGoodMagic.com in the next couple weeks, so I'm excited to have that. I plan on adding the custom magic sets section to the website so you can systematically go through all of those and leave comments and stuff like that. There's going to be a couple more link changes too. So yeah, stop on out at the website and check those out. I'm back doing Cons of Tarkir drafts, so I hope you're enjoying those. And we'll see you next week for the next podcast. Have a good one.